Hey, hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. For this Tuesday discussion, one of the questions that came through on Instagram was, Jeff, what do you serve guests when they come to your house? And I understand the kind of underlying tension of this particular question. I think the advice can go in multiple directions on how to handle this. So we're going to tackle this from a few areas, and then honestly, by the end of this, I'm going to admit that I am truly at fault when it comes to this question. When I reflected on it, I've actually got quite a big problem, and I'm going to have to go to the stores to overcome it because I think something not good has actually happened to my whiskey collection over the course of the last 2 years. So, we're going to get specifically into this question, go through the topic, and then, I'll admit all of my faults to you. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. Let's kick off the show. All right. Well, during today's discussion, I will be sipping on a Larceny single barrel. This was gifted to me by Northwest Bourbon. So cheers to Mark. And I think this one actually fits the topic very well, being a 92 proof bourbon that has a good amount of age on it and is very accessible, but also special. And I think the big thing about what do you know to serve your guests, you got to know your audience. I mean, that's the main thing in all this. You got to know your audience. The biggest key with any audience isn't just where they are in their journey, but how tolerant they are to proof. If they can't handle proof, don't give them something above, 90 proof, 95 proof. Anytime you get to triple digits, you're probably getting yourself in trouble. Or if you do have people that are into bourbon, they can't handle proof, but they appreciate flavor, just have an understanding of what it tastes like when it's watered down. So you got to experiment with your own whiskeys. Taste it over rocks, taste it watered down. See what you would give to people in these type of situations. But you got to know your audience in this. So when someone asks me the question of what do I typically serve my guests, it is a very multifaceted question that was actually, I mean, that's not one to one answer at all. I can't give a singular answer to this. But I will say, if you do understand your audience and where they are in your journey, it does make things a whole lot easier. And I do have some go to pours that would be between 80 to 92 proof that I will give to people when they are first starting out on their journey, or if they simply can't handle proof, but they really like trying something. Um, and maybe it's just on ice, they need it watered down, but they do appreciate when they get that flavor from it. So the things I do give typically to my guests, now keep in mind, I'm in Ohio, so this first answer is very biased towards my specific area and what I can get my hands on pretty regularly. But Weller Green Label, that 90 proof Weller Green Label weeder, like throw that on ice. That is a crowd pleaser through and through. And it only runs me about $23-25. So I have no problem splashing that stuff around. I even have a handle of it somewhere around here. Um, but that I will splash around. But getting more specific, one of the things I love introducing people with is the American whiskey from Michter's. It's 86 proof. I think it's very inviting. It does well on rocks. It keeps its creaminess and some flavor comes through. But the way I play the strategy personally when someone comes into my house, I've got a barrel upstairs in the dining room that is filled with more classic things to share type of bottles. And then in the basement is where you then get into the barrel proof, more expensive, rarer things. So depending on what the audience is and me knowing my audience, it's either kind of keeping them introducing them to what's in the barrel, or if I don't know them the moment they walk in the door, getting to know them as they explore what's in the barrel and then inviting them downstairs. So I do segregate my collection a little bit from things that are more shelfers are upstairs in the barrel, readily accessible in the moment, versus what is downstairs. I've got a door, I've got stairs, I've got a little bit of a barrier. I have the ability to invite people to come downstairs to enjoy it. And that's one of the ways that I can try to manage this situation, is by having a divide between what is available to anyone who walks in the door versus, yeah, you kind of need an invite to come downstairs. But ultimately, if you get a few pours in me, you're probably coming downstairs anyway. Now, there is something awful that I think has happened to my collection through, I guess, good intents. But it happened very naturally. It happened slowly. And I'm now sitting here in 2023 with a problem. And my problem is that my collection became too dang bougie. It just happened. I don't know when it happened. I know why it happened. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But it happened very slowly. And it's become a problem for me hosting guests. And I've got to find a correction for this problem. And I'm very interested to see if anybody else is having this problem. So let me know in the comments, particularly on this section of the video, if you can relate to this, if you're experiencing it yourself. But what I feel like happened over the course of my bourbon journey, we're now going back about 5 years since I've really been into this. But I went through a process where I pretty much drank everything that was available on the shelf one by one. I bought it, I brought it home, I reviewed it on Distiller, I explored it, and then I shared it away. And then that bottle disappeared. I just went on to the next one, next one, next one. But there was always a steady stream of things that were available on the shelf and at all proof points. And what has slowly happened is that I have gotten too invested into single barrels and single barrel picks. So I had always a Old Forester. I always had a 1910. I always had a 1920 on the shelf. And then I went through a process where the barrel picks came out and they came out of cast strength. And I put all of my energy to finding Old Forester barrel picks. And that was a really fun adventure. And I did the same thing to Elijah Craig. I do not have a regular 92, 94 proof Elijah Craig pick anymore. I now got the barrel proof picks. I went through that. I highlighted the larceny here. Had Mark not given this one to me, I wouldn't have a 92 proof larceny pick anymore. I just have the barrel proof larceny picks. So every brand that I had went through this transitional period where if I did kill a bottle, the replacement for that brand was a barrel proof pick of that same brand. 1792 would be another good example. There is no small batch now to be found in the house. There is no bottle and bond to be found in the house, but you can find 2 foolproof picks. And that just happened over the course of time. It was almost like, in my mind, I was upgrading, right? Like I was slowly trading in the old model for the new model. But if you do that enough times and your whole house is only filled with barrel picks and barrel proof picks, you've now alienated pretty much 80% of the guests that you're going to get in your house. I mean, let's be honest. My collection is no longer catered to being accessible. It is catered to a lot of the people watching this video, but particularly probably 20-30% of the bourbon market. So already I'm at a downhill battle with I'm talking about bringing guests in and people in that haven't necessarily even gotten into whiskey in the first place. So what do I introduce them to if I've upgraded everything I have to some barrel pick, barrel sticker, bottle sticker, barrel proof thing? It's a problem. And where I realized it was a problem more and more was recently. I still have things that are lower proof and I can figure out people's profiles. But when I was going through it, there was one particular question recently that really cut on my heartstrings. And I was like, this is where I'm going wrong. I need to fix this problem. So I had guests over, had a party, and I gave one of my guests a barrel strength pick that the junkies actually did. So I gave her a pour of that. And the reason that I gave her a pour of that was I knew she couldn't handle something barrel proof, but she did like aged whiskey. It's 104 proof, so it kind of fit that perfectly. And I gave it to her, and she sipped it, and she was like, "This is amazing. Like, what is this? Where can I buy this?" And what has to be then my answer to that question? Well, you can't, because that's a single barrel that I got from a group that I'm in, and you can go find something that's that label, but it might not taste like that again. And I haven't seen a barrel strength on the shelf for quite a while. So yeah, I just kind of teased you accidentally on something that you like and something that you can never buy again. So you're welcome for that. So think about that when you're giving things to your guests and knowing your audience. When you're introducing people and you're trying to get them excited to whiskey, if you do land and you have a direct hit in Battleship here, right? Like I hit that shit perfectly. I didn't follow through though because she couldn't buy it herself. So what's the whole point of this? Like I can't just have a collection that nobody else can enjoy when they leave my house. Like that doesn't actually serve the purpose of educating people about whiskey and bourbons that I want to do. So that's where I do have to go through a correction here. And I've been thinking about this for a little bit. One of the things that people do on their channels, they'll do like a $200 bourbon haul. Um, I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to do that particularly for a gimmick purpose, though it does sound like a gimmick when I say it out loud. But I need to have whiskeys that fit that type of audience. And I do have a bourbon tasting coming up in just a few weeks that I will be hosting here that needs more accessible bourbons that people can actually buy. So I'll do some more content on that. There needs to be a correction. And it actually does benefit the channel quite a bit because what I need to do ultimately with our scoring system is have benchmark whiskeys scored in the system so that we understand the relative gaps of here's something you can buy every day versus here's this thing. So 1920 is going to be one of the first ones that I do that to. Old Forester 1920, to be clear. But we need more benchmarks in the scoring system for the scoring system to make sense. So I will be working on that. And it's almost like a reset or a de-evolution of where I am in my bourbon journey, where I've got to take a step back and I've got to stop being so reliant on single barrel craziness because, yeah, they could be great, but and I could share it out with some people in the community here, sure, and they'll appreciate it. But gosh, most of the people that come into my house aren't going into it with those type of experiences or that type of background. They're relying on me to educate them. So I need a better collection here to do so, which means I need to reset it back to where I was in 2019, 2020, when I had more accessible things on the shelf. But the exciting thing is, I do think I could spend the money even more wisely than I did back then. And then you'll get to see what I do and what I buy through that journey. So that overall, I think, answers the question. What do I serve to people when they come into the house? I have a few go-to brands, but I'm actually currently in kind of a rough spot because of my over reliance on pursuing single barrel unique whiskeys. And that has kind of made my collection too bougie. Now, if you know how to spell bougie, let me know in the comments as well, because I've had some conversations about that recently. All right. Well, that's my answer to today's question. Interested to see what other conversations or questions come out of it in the comments, but interested to know your go-to whiskey too when it comes to what your guests come over and what they drink. Do you have a decanter that you load up with something go-to like Evan Williams Bottle and Bond or something like that? Like, what is your strategy to this? I've got my upstairs, downstairs kind of strategy. I'm interested to hear about your strategy. Well, thank you for joining me today, everybody. Catch me later for another Whiskey Tuesday discussion. Bye, everyone.